Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gil Sandoval. I'm a civil technical specialist here at ATG. Today's webinar is going to be on field to finish. Now, today's webinar, and here's a little overview and agenda of today. The field to finish is a general term used to describe survey processes that determines the connectivity and symbology of the points surveyed in the field. Okay. Now, within our agenda today, we will be looking at the survey database, as well as the figured prefix database, survey figures, the LINEWORK code sets, and also how our CTC survey sweeper helps us out and automates some of our processes too and speeds some processes up for us. Now, a quick overview of our survey database. It will be in our tool space, and I got a couple of screenshots here on the left-hand side of how everything's set up, as well as the settings. Here in the top, just kind of briefly going over how everything's set up. Here in the tool space, we do have a few icons here that are highlighted in blue. Now, this is going to be in the Home tab. And in the Home tab, we do have our tool space highlighted, but just make sure that we do have this survey button highlighted as well in blue. That would give us access to our survey tab within our tool space and gives us all of our tools that we can work in processing our data through our survey database, as well as our survey figures and our code sets. Okay. Now, once we're talking about survey figures and the difference between figures and codes, once our guys in the field shoot concrete, dirt, etc., they will put a code into our collector, and when we get that code into CAD is going to be looking at for our codes and to determine on how the codes are going to be processed, if they're going to be line work, etc. Now, here is a couple of screenshots of how that is set up. Here on the left-hand side, here in the lower left-hand side is our figure prefix database manager. Okay, now we have a few codes here. It gives you options to enter codes as well as enter if they are going to be break lines. Okay, now break lines are going to be figures, and we can enter those into our surfaces and how we're going to create our surface, as well as our point groups. But this gives us an automation of how they are going to be stringed together, saves us some time. So just make sure that we have all these codes set up, and I'll show you guys how we can set these codes up and how we can have these set up in our survey database. Now we can set them up with layers, as also added them to survey sites. Here on the right-hand side is a tree of the survey database and kind of showing you where the figure prefix database lives, as well as we can have multiple in our drawing, depending on where we're at and what project we're working on. Okay. Now, this is kind of a screenshot of an example of how the figures are going to be processed in our CAD. Okay. Now, we do have a couple of different line types, colors, etc. These are going to be determined on the layers they're going to be on. But you will see that we do have Kogo points spread out through our whole drawing. There's a handful of them that are in open space. We have some white shots over here. These are typically ground shots. We have some here in the middle that are probably concrete shots, but also you'll see that we have some Kogo points that are stringed together by lines. Now, we have some buildings here. We also have some curb data. Okay. Now, all these surveys are processed through the survey database, and these are automated through CAD. So it just saves us some time connecting dots, getting these line work created, as well as makes it easy for us to enter these as a surface and create a surface for our site. Now, when it comes to your survey database and specifically our figures, we have a LINEWORK code set. Okay, so when we bring in our survey figures, our points, they will be coded correctly. They will be coded per concrete, ground, etc. But they will have to have a suffix at the end of our points in order for them to string. Now, here on the left-hand side is an example of how that is going to work. We have a LINEWORK code set here on the left-hand side, and kind of give you a rundown of how we're going to automate this and look at these settings. Now, here on the left-hand side, you do see we have CTC, which is the name of our group, our code set here. But an example of how these work, we do have a special code category here, and they have a few here that we're going to use today and kind of showcase, specifically begin, end, and close. Now, these specific letters here are going to be added to the end of our codes when we get them in from the field. This is going to indicate that, yes, we have a code set, but it's going to indicate also where our line starts, where our line ends, etc. Okay, so you do see that we have quite a bit of options here to choose from. We can update these as we want to, as well as add any additional codes as we want as well. Okay, also here on the right-hand side is going to show you where our LINEWORK code set is going to live. This is going to be in our survey database. Here in the bottom is going to be where our LINEWORK code set is. We can jump in there, add some new stuff, alter some stuff, update, etc. Okay, just kind of giving you a rundown how they're going to look, as well as I'm going to bring up a code list here in a little bit and show you guys what they're going to look like in our text files or our CSVs. Okay, our text file is going to be sent in from the field, as well as CSVs. CSVs would be an Excel file. Typically, CSVs are a little easier to work with. We can actually see everything in columns. Excel will be a little easier to navigate between, and we can see our codes as well. Okay. Now, once we jump over to our survey sweeper, and I'm going to show you how our survey sweeper actually automates this process and allows us to take the mistakes out, as well as points. Once we start our survey database and we're entering points, etc., our points are going to live in our survey database. And once we make corrections to codes that may be miscoded, maybe there's a letter missing, etc., they're still going to live on a survey database, and it kind of speeds up the process of deleting these lines, deleting these COGO points, so we don't have to go back and forth, and it makes just a lot easier and more streamlined to automate this process. Okay. Now, this is kind of an example of what it's going to look like if we have miscoded COGO points in it from the field. You'll notice here we have a building with a yellow figure that's been drawn through our figure database as well as through our code set, but you'll notice that we have a corner missing here. Okay, so if we ever go in and correct this corner, have this automated to snap to the point that we want to, well, this survey figure is still going to live in our survey database. Survey Sweeper is going to allow us to delete that specific figure from our survey database and have our corrected survey figure live in our drawing. So every time we refigure or update our figures or reprocess our line work, we know we will no longer get this error here. It will be corrected in our drawing, as well as if we have points that are miscoded or we have too much information in a certain area, we want to take some stuff out, that's always an option as well. Okay. So let's go ahead and jump over to CAD. Let's run a demo and show you guys how all these processes work, as well as how the settings are set up in CAD. Okay. So here we go. We have some line work here, and this is all curved line work. We can zoom in and see that we have, some flow lines, back a curve, etc. But this specific site is going to be a commercial site. There's going to be a building in the middle, kind of give you a preview of what we're going to be looking at there in a couple of screenshots that we just saw on the slide. But again, we don't have any of those survey points, or we don't have any of our survey figures in our drawing yet. Okay, so how do we add these points? How do we get these points to automate together? How do we get them to live together? Well, there's a few things we have to do before we enter these points into our drawing. Now, when we get our points from our field guys, again, they're going to be coming in at two different formats. You're going to be in a text file or typically a CSV. Now, CSV, once we get it from our guys in the field, we'll get a Excel file here, and this is typically what it's going to look like. Now we can expand this a little bit. Actually, that's not the right column. We can expand this for description. Okay, and this is typically what you're going to see. We'll see P&EZD, which is going to be the point number, the northern eastern elevation and description. Okay, so just before we do anything, it's always a good practice to open up our text file, open up our CSV, check out our codes, make sure everything's coded correctly. But just kind of scanning down, you kind of see some of these codes have those extra suffixes at the end. Okay, now we can scroll down, check out some stuff here, specifically for some line work, just showing you guys how they look in our code set. Okay, we do have a bunch of buildings here. Notice we have a building B that would indicate that's the beginning of our building. Okay, just a few other things as well. EOC, we have a B for our beginner for our EOC. We also have a CLS, which is a close. Okay, so just showing you guys that we do have similar codes, but at the same time, just checking out also our suffixes to make sure that our code sets are set correctly. Granted that we're looking at a code set, we can't really determine how the LINEWORK is going to automate in our CAD. At the same time, it's always a good practice, just kind of breeze through, check out what we have here, make sure everything's coded correctly, nothing is out of order. But again, only so much you can do from a CSV, just determining that we have a good file that we can import into our drawing, okay? Now, once we've checked our code set, we've checked out our CSV, excuse me, we checked our CSV, we haven't checked our code set yet. What we want to do is make sure that we have all of our survey data set up and we have our survey database set up before we can bring files in, okay? Excuse me. Now, again, we do have a tool space here. Tool space is pretty typical where all of our dynamic tools live, points, alignments, surfaces, etc. Okay, and that's going to be in our prospector. But again, tool space here is in our home tab, and by default, it does have a lot of these settings turned on. Okay, but just make sure that we have this survey button here turned on. This is going to have a tripod and a collector here in the top left corner in our home tab. Okay, you will notice that we do have additional tabs here. And if you don't see our survey tab, just make sure that it's toggled on so we get that survey tab displayed. Now we do have toolbox settings, etc. Okay, those are also included here in the home tab under our palettes. Okay, so if you're ever unsure or wondering why we don't have these tools displayed, this is where you need to look. Okay, now let's jump over to our survey tab and let's check out what we got here. Okay. Now within our survey tab, we have a few tools here and a few trees that we can expand and check out. Okay, before we expand anything, the 4 categories we have here are our survey database, our equipment database, figure prefix database, and our LINEWORK code set. Okay, now if we were to expand all these, there's not too much stuff in here. Okay, we do have a few addition of our prefix databases and our LINEWORK code sets. Okay, as well as our database here. Our SDB survey sweeper database. Okay, now you can name anything you want to. You can also right click on survey database and create a new one. Okay, but just make sure that this is kind of like a data shortcut where you will need to right click on survey database here at the top and set a working folder. Okay, so AutoCAD does have a default place that it stores all of our survey databases. This is going to be in the ENU folder, but at the same time, we can place this in a different folder, maybe working on a certain project and we want to have everything collected in the same place. That's always an option, but just make sure that we actually set our working folder so we can find our survey database and we can have it populate here in our list. Now, once we find and locate our survey database, we need to open it for edit. Okay, and how do we do this? Now, again, you can have multiple here that will be listed in under your survey databases and you can go back and forth between them. But at the same time, this is the one we're going to be working on today. So what we need to do is right click on our survey database and we need to do an open for edit. Okay. Once we do an open for edit, notice that we get all these tools here that we can use. Now, a bunch of these are populated with survey points. We do have some survey point groups here as well as our figures. Okay. Now, this is a living database. This can be updated throughout your project. You can have this closed down. You can bring this up later. You can add additional information to it. So this is not a one-stop shop. This is going to be something that you can open up throughout your project. Okay. And you can always update as you go, which is why the survey sweeper is going to become in handy later on because we have additional information that we're going to enter into our survey database. We're going to have some updates and we're also going to have to take some data out so it doesn't repopulate those areas that we had in before. Okay. Now we do have a few sites here as well. Okay, we have a gas station site, which is going to be our commercial site here. We also have survey points here. Okay, and these are going to be survey points that we did have in that CSV, but now they're living in our survey database. Okay, we do have a point group. Once we enter our point group, it does have a preset point group that we can set it up to. That's always an option as well. Granted, you can bring these points in and add them to point groups later on, whatever you prefer. Same time, you can bring them in, maybe you can have a date, etc. Whatever is easier for you. Okay. Now below that, we do have the equipment database, as well as our figure and line work code set. Okay. And inside our prefix database, we do have a few options here. Okay. Now, again, you can have multiple options here. You can have additional information here. You can have it processed through different figure databases, and those are going to be automating your line work. And in order to get a specific database to work, you need to right click on one of them. Specifically, this is the one that's bold. That would indicate that it is live in my drawing, but see, the one CTC demo here is not. What we can do is right click and make current. So depending on which one you're working in, just be mindful of which one's bold, which one's not. The one's bold is the one you're going to be processing through. But again, you can have multiple in here and you can have it make current depending on what you're looking at, what site you're looking at, and also your prefix database is set up and how you want them to look. Okay. You also have the line work code set here at the bottom. Okay. Now we only have one in here, but the same rules apply. If you have multiple line code sets, you can also do a right click, open for edit, or you can do a make current. Okay. Now again, these are able to be updated. They are a living document, so you can always go in later on and add more stuff. In order to go into our figure prefix database, we first need to right click here, manage figure prefix database, and this will open up our window. Okay, and this is similar, the same window we looked at in our slideshow, but just showing you guys that we have the option to update these, go in, add some new ones as well. Here at the top, we do have a plus button here. This indicate that we can create a new item if we want to. We can add more codes more codes to this list, as well as if we ever decide to update the site, update the layer, this is where we can change and make those updates. Okay. Now moving on to the code set. Same thing, if we were to right click and open for edit, okay, this is where our code set's going to live as well. So again, our code sets are going to be our suffixes that are going to be included in our codes. Again, if we get a lot of back of curve codes, etc., we will need a B to begin our line, and we'll need a C to continue, or E to end our line. Okay. Now we do have additional tools here we're going to look at, close specifically for buildings, but at the same time, these work the same way. These will need to be added to the end of our code. So once we get them into our drawing, once the line is created, CAD knows where to stop and knows where to start. Okay. You can edit these texts. Okay, and you can customize this as you want to. Okay, CAD does give you a preset code set, and you can always use that and update it as you want to, but at the same time, go ahead and give it a name depending on what your job is. And again, you can come in here and customize it as you want to. Okay. Now, how do we bring in our points, and how do we generate this process, or how do we generate our line work? Okay. Well, there's a few ways to bring in points. Okay, we do have a few options through our prospector as well as our menu bar. Now I do have a few things open here right now. I do have a menu bar at the very top. Okay, and usually this is displayed. This is not displayed by default. I do prefer it to be open when I'm dealing with points, just because I have a few extra tools here, as well as here in our create ground data. We do have some point tools here as well. You can also go to your prospector and enter points here through your point groups, as well as your points here. Okay, now this is good depending on what we're doing. Again, you can enter points in as a text file or a CSV. If we bring them in through these 3 different tools I just showed you guys, we won't have our line work processed. Okay, we can bring them in, we can use them for surfaces, we can use them for whatever we need to use them for. But again, our line work won't be processed. The only way we can get our line work to process is if we bring them in through our survey database. Okay, so it's not wrong to bring them in through these 3 different ways, and you can still use them. You can still create 3D polylines, feature lines, etc. But at the same time, it does take longer. And we're in the business of getting stuff to our clients as quick as we can, as well as making it efficient and let CAD do as much work as we can. Okay. So again, not a bad way. It's not a wrong way. But again, if we want our processed line work to be created, we need to go through our survey database. Okay. Now within our survey database, again, let's go ahead and jump back over to Survey tab, and let's focus here on our survey database. Okay. We do have a few figures and survey points again created in our survey database, and you'll recognize those by these additional pluses here and these boxes here on the left-hand side of our categories that would indicate that these are populated. Okay, we do have networks, groups, etc. Some other options that we can enter some information in. But at the same time, you will see that we do have additional information here within our survey database. Okay, now if I expand this, expand my toolbar, tool space, okay, you will get a preview again of your points. Okay, and the points are living in our survey database. So if we're ever to close this and open it back up, they will still live here. Okay, and we can always add more as we want to. Okay, but as again, if you are to unsure where you're at, unsure of what points you have, points, etc., point groups, you can always select here. You will get a preview of your points here at the bottom. You can kind of scan through again and check your codes, make sure everything is correct. Again, it's kind of condensed view here, but at the same time, it does give you the same information that we saw in our CSV file. So always a good practice to check our codes. Always a good check to make sure everything is okay to insert. We have no errors, etc. We have good codes. Okay. And you kind of just scan this down, check out what you have, etc. Okay. Now, again, we do have these points living in our survey database, and how do we get them into our drawing? Okay. Well, there's a few ways to do this, and there's also a few ways to process our line work. Okay. But again, they're all living within our survey database. Now, we can insert our points individually, or not individually, by themselves, and have the line work processed after the fact, or we can do it all at the same time. Either way works. There's not a wrong way to do it. Sometimes bringing in the points first to just check out where everything's landed, making sure that we have good layers formatted, everything's in the right area. That's okay, not a big deal. But at the same time, you can process the line work at the same time. So what you can do here within our survey database, again, notice that we do have our populated groups here, just to indicate which groups that we can use. Okay, so we're specifically talking about our points and figures today. What you can do is do a right click on our survey points, and you can either process your line work, okay, or down here in points, you can do insert into drawing. Okay, you also have the option to remove from drawing. So it does work in a few different ways. Again, remove from drawing, maybe you added your points. Later on down the road, you don't need a bunch of them, you just need your line work. That's always an option. Okay, let's go ahead and bring them in, check out what we have, and then let's process our line work and see how well our codes are coded. Okay, so again, you can right click on points, you can go down to points, insert it in the drawing. Okay, you also have the option to right click here at the very top, which is on our survey database itself, and you can do an import and import survey data. So once you do an import survey data from the specific database itself, this will add it to the list. This will include it here. Okay, and then you have to tell CAD itself to insert them into the drawing. Now you can do this at the same time. You can import survey data as well as import our survey points at the same time. But at the same time, if you do import survey data, it will be included in our list. We will be able to see this in our previews. We'll be able to see for mistakes, etc. So it's always an option that you can do. But again, since we already have our survey points here listed, it's already populated, we can go ahead and just do a right click here, hover over points, and do an insert to drawing. Awesome. So now we have all of our points in our drawing. Now there's quite a bit of information here. Okay, there's a lot of points here. A lot of them are different colors. I can zoom in, notice that we do have some building stuff here. EOC would indicate edge of concrete. Okay, a lot of cool stuff here, labeled, as well as we have all of our stuff on different layers, all pretty cool. But at the same time, we don't have our line work. Okay, now I have seen it, and it does happen in certain instances. People bring in line work or bringing these codes, and then they start connecting dots. Okay, yes, that works. You can snag to node if you would like to, and you can populate a 3D polyline or a feature line with these elevations. That does work. Okay, survey figures are pretty much a feature line. Okay, but at the same time, let's make CAD work for us. Let's be efficient with our work. Okay, so again, importing these points through our survey database will work. We can also see everything here. We can grab and drag any point that we want to, as well as here in our top menu bar, we can list our points and bring in our panorama and verify that we have all of our points entered per our survey database. Again, this is another check that you can see, styles, point labels, etc. Okay, so you'll see again, we have our matching points per our matching survey database, just kind of another quick check to verify everything is okay. And again, also all of our points in the same place. We can always put this on the side screen and verify that we have everything included that we need to. Okay, now again, this is in our panorama. We do get a tab here for our point editor. So if you're in a situation where you're messing with different formats or different tools and your panorama pulls up, you always get an extra tab here, and just notice that we do have a point editor tab just to cycle through to make sure that you're in this right area. Okay, I'll just move this to the side here, keep this on my side screen. What I like to do is just keep it there. Again, just a quick check if I ever need to go back, check out the points I have, etc. So again, we have all of our points in our drawing. Now we need to process our line work. Okay, so how do we do this? We can actually do the same way. Here in our survey points, we can do a right click and we can do our process line work. This is our first option. And this is an option I was saying earlier, we can do at the same time. If we're ever to open this process line work, we get this little window here, and we have a few options here. Now, the few options that we do have are our current figure prefix database. This is going to be the one that's going to be in bold here. Okay, these are going to be the ones that are actually our current databases and our code set. But at the same time, we do have a pull down menu to option to select if we want to do the CTC demo, etc. if we have more included into our list. So yes, we do have our current figure database populated. It is in bold text, but at the same time, CAD gives us that option if we're in a situation where we didn't go in there and switch it, we forgot to do it, or at the same time, if we're in a situation where we want to use an additional one, that's always an option. The same thing applies for our LINEWORK code set. We can always expand this. Right now, we only have one tool here, only one LINEWORK code set, so we only have one here in the list. But at the same time, if we have multiple options, they will be displayed here in the pull down. Okay. Now, under the LINEWORK code set in the prefix database, we do have our sequence. Okay. This can be ordered by import number or by point number. Okay. Now, import number order is what I prefer. This is going to keep everything in line. This is going to be keep everything for our code set. It's going to keep everything ordered, but at the same time, you do have the option to do a point number as well. Just be mindful of our codes because sometimes stuff will get shot out of order, but at the same time, if we're stringing together with their code set, they should connect as well. Okay, now the two options below that is our insert figure objects as well. And also see we have our insert survey points. So at the same time, we could have had this checked on. We could have just done a process line work and we could have our survey figures inserted as well as our survey points. That's always an option. But since we already have our points in there, we'll just go ahead and insert our figure objects. Okay, but again, you do have the option to enter both if you want to. Okay, so with our options set up correctly, I'm going to hit OK, and let's see if our line work is processed. And there we go. Okay. So just by first glance, it did a pretty good job. We have a lot of stuff in there. We have a center line of street up here. Looks like we have maybe a sanitary line here, some rim elevations for some manholes, as well as some inlets. Maybe this is storm, okay, as well as our center line to our road. You also see that we have some shots here in open space, okay. Let's just go ahead and examine how these are connected, okay. Let's just go ahead and examine our center line of our street. So just by first glance, I go ahead and select our line, and it is a survey figure. You'll notice that our contextual ribbon will show up, okay. It will show that it is a figure, and it is a figure of a center line. Kind of gives us an indication here in the tab, as well as we look in our figures, it will be populated as a center line. Now, how is this created? Okay, let's zoom in here and notice that we have our CLB. That would indicate this is a center line and the beginning of our line. Okay, also notice that we have a number 17 for our point number. Okay, so let's just go down the line and see what we have. Okay, we have a CL without any suffix. We have a 20 for our point number, 26, 29. So you will notice that we don't have our consecutive point numbers, which is what I was saying earlier. When we're importing, we can tell it to do an import order or a point number. This is also an important thing to know. If our surveyors, like how it's doing here in this exercise, they're doing strings across the road. You'll notice that we have a 19 here, a 20 in the middle of the road, and a 21. Okay, so if we told CAD to order them by point number, it would connect these 3 dots here. And that's not what we want. Okay, we want them to string along the center line. Okay, so again, we do have a 17 here, a CLB. Let's go up our center line, check out what we have, and maybe let's hover all the way to the end. And then we have our E. Okay, that would indicate that's the end of our line. Okay, also, let's see if we have any curves, which we don't. No big deal. Okay, maybe we can zoom into this curve here. This is a perfect example here. Okay, so we have a string here for our curve. We have a BC here, BC, BC, also PC. That would indicate this is a point of curvature. Okay, that would indicate that while we have a curve here in our curve. Let's check out another area here. We have a PT for point of transition. Okay, also a PC for point of curvature. Now this is not perfect here, but at the same time, CAD is trying to work with the points that we have. Okay, it is pretty good. We do have a weird transition here, which we will need to update. But at the same time, it does give us a good place to start. Okay, check out the other side, as well as we have a PC point of curvature. Okay, all the way down to a PT point of transition. Okay, looks pretty good. Okay, now let's go ahead and zoom into the areas that we need to focus in on. And again, CAD is not perfect. It is trying its best with our codes, but CAD is trying to do its best with the codes that we have provided, but at the same time, there might be a fat finger, there might be a code that missed in the field, it happens. Again, this file is pretty large. This is not a huge site, but at the same time, there's quite a bit of information here. And you'll notice that a lot of stuff strung pretty good together. But at the same time, you'll notice that we have a corner here that's missing. Okay. Now this is a BC, okay, and BLD is what we're going to string together, and that would make sense, okay. But you also notice that we do have a corner here that's missing. So typically we want to extend this here. We want to include this point here as well, okay. Now we can focus down here at the bottom, see some stuff that we have as well, okay. Now how do we fix this, okay? As well as a line like this, we do have a trail that does zigzag like this. This is not typical. Okay, looks like we need to string this together and have this point connect here before here. Okay, so again, CAD is trying its best. It does recognize that we have a trail, and it does give us a proper line work. But again, coordinated with the guys in the field or a fat finger, it does happen. Okay, so again, how do we fix this? Okay, now we can go in and give it some more points. We can go in and change some coding if we want to, or if we wanted to, right here, let's go ahead and focus in. We have a 259, a 260. I can select this line here, do a right click and do an edit survey figure properties. Okay. Once I bring my properties open, it will show me that I have my figure here. It gives me indication of arrows in the direction that it's going to flow. Okay, so right now it's going around this way. It's connecting my dots here, 259 to 260, which makes sense. That's in order. Okay, but again, we're missing a corner here. So typically what I would do is I would open my properties here. I would examine what's going on. I do have a name of a building here, okay, as well as my break line, okay. Bunch of stuff here within my survey database, but here at the bottom is where my codes are created, okay. Now we have all of our lists here of all of our points. You notice that we do have a figure that starts with a building B, which indicate that is the building beginning, as well as a CLS, which is the building close. But again, we do have a missing corner. So what we typically would need to do and how to fix this is 259 and 260. I need to enter this point in between. I need to make sure that it connects here. So what I would do is go over to my 259, select my 259 and hit a plus. Okay. Now it should add me another one, maybe at the bottom. I'm going to delete this one and I'm going to move this up. It shouldn't be that difficult to get it there, but let's go ahead and move it up to between 259 and 260. Oops, too many. That's not what I wanted to do. 259 and 260. Let's go ahead and key in 159. Let's see what happens. 159, hit apply. That is not what I wanted to. 197, excuse me. 197. Perfect. So you'll see now that this is typically what you would have to do if you need to go in there and correct our survey figures. We did enter our point. Notice that it is indicating that it is a BCE. Okay, so that does indicate that it is not according to our survey figures here. But at the same time, you will indicate that it does give us our close of our building, and that's what we want to display. Okay, so I'm going to hit apply and hit OK. Sweet. You'll notice that now we have our building that has been closed. Okay, so pretty cool. You know, we can go in there and change some stuff. Again, these are survey figures. They do have populated elevations at each vertices. These are grabbed from our COGO points, and we can enter these as a break line to our surface. But again, if we were ever go down and enter more information, okay, and we did a process line work, we updated this. Let's do an update. Okay, let's do a refresh maybe, and maybe process some line work. Do it again. Zoom back into our building. Notice that we still have our error here. Okay. Now, yes, we do have our line work here, but at the same time, it's always going to recognize this code here, and it's not going to fix it within our survey database. Okay, so what do I do? Now, how do I fix this? So if I was going to look in our prospector, our properties, etc., I notice that this is a building, as well as this is a building. Okay. And I need to automate this so it doesn't populate anymore. Again, if I was ever to process this data again, I can always go back there and change the data, reinsert it, but it just takes a lot longer than it needs to. Again, I did have this correction here. I did snap it to this corner. That's what I wanted to do. But again, I wanted to get rid of the survey figure. I don't want to process this way anymore. So that's where my survey sweeper becomes in handy. Okay. So my sim project suite, I do have a bunch of cool tools here. Okay, and just a side note, okay, we do have a bunch of tools here, corridors, grading, pipes, etc. And we have our survey category or panel here on the very left-hand side, okay? Now, we do have a few features in here. We have a point file converter as well as a feature to alignment, which are powerful tools as well, okay? But today, we're just gonna be talking about our survey figure, sweeper, excuse me. Now, just hovering over our tool, it does give you a brief explanation of how this tool works. It's going to simultaneously delete survey points / figures from drawing and survey database. And that's what we want. Okay. We no longer want this building to populate this way. We already have one that we're good with. Okay. So if we're ever to process it again, we don't want this to be created here. So what we need to do is start our survey sweeper. Notice that it doesn't have a window that pops up. and I do have a little indication here next to my cursor that says select survey figures or points. I can always notice down here on my command line as well, it wants me to select survey figures or points. So that will indicate that we're in the survey sweeper and we can automate this tool. Okay, now I can go through and select this survey figure. Notice that it does highlight blue. Okay, or I can just hover over points as well. Maybe this is a ground shot I don't need. Maybe this one as well, no big deal. Okay, just an example. And once I'm happy with my survey figures, I will notice that here in my command line, and just a side note, once I'm in my command line, I can always expand this and indicate which my history is. Notice that it does say it found a survey figure as well as 2 more additional points. Okay, that doesn't indicate what it found, but it says it does find one of the other and it gives us a total. So right now I have 2 points selected as well as my survey figure. Here at the bottom it says 3 total. Okay, so that's perfect. Okay. Now, again, once I have these selected, I have everything that I want to delete. All I need to do is enter, and I get this notification here. Now, this notification is going to indicate delete 2 survey points and 1 survey figure. That's what I selected. That's what I determined that I need to delete. Okay. All I need to do is hit yes. And let's go ahead and examine through our figures if our figure is there. Okay. Now we do have a bunch of stuff here indicating that we have some BC, which indicate the back of curb. Let's move down to BLDs. And let's check out what we have here. Notice once I selected our BLD here at the bottom, our big white line around the building that we corrected is now highlighted and is in our survey figure now, in our survey database. Perfect. Perfect. Now both of the buildings, since I processed it twice, it bring it in twice, but at the same time, now it is populated and indicating that we have those updated survey figures and we no longer populate with that miscoded line work. Now there are a couple additional information. There's another building here. This looks like a edge of concrete area. We can connect this as well. We can do the same thing. Okay. Correct this survey figure, delete this with a survey sweeper, and we no longer have to deal with that mistake any longer. Pretty powerful tool. Automates the process of going back and forth, as well as deleting tedious points, points out in space, points that were shot 2 times, 3 times, etc. Just really easy tool, and automates and speeds a lot of things up in the office and allows you to speed the process up to get our surface created for our site. That is the end of our demo. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in and checking out our survey sweeper. I want to thank everybody, and I hope you guys learned something, and I hope you guys can learn survey sweeper here soon in a project coming up. Thank you very much. My name is Gil Sandoval again. I'm a civil technical specialist at ATG. I'd like to thank you.
Hey there, thanks for tuning in. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe and check out some of the other content on our channel.